Good morning. Calling the workshop of the Del Mar College Board of Regents to order at 10:30 a.m. This is Tuesday, July 9th, and we are convening in the Eisenstein Boardroom. We have a quorum and can conduct business. I'd like to open our meeting with a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Mr. Salinas, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And please join me in reading the Del Mar College mission statement. Del Mar College provides access to quality education, workforce preparation, and lifelong learning for student and community success. Del Mar College is streaming live audio and video from the official Board of Regents meeting on the college's website in real time, with the exception of portions of the meeting that are considered closed session by statute. We have one item on our workshop agenda for today, and that is discussion related to our 2019-2020 fiscal year budget. I'm going to ask Dr. Escamilla to start off the conversation and lay the groundwork for this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to kick us off this morning. Summer is in full swing, and today's workshop is evidence of that. As we've promised, we're coming forth with an overview of our preparatory, of all of our information that we've prepared and all of the steps taken to gather information over the past 12 calendar months as we prepare to build next year's budget. Before we go ahead, the budget team is here. I call it the tip of the spear, and I want to thank them. Jackie, Kathy, John, Roy, and others, along with Mr. Garcia, certainly, for all the efforts that you all have put forth to bring us to this point. If we can get us to the first slide, please, Mr. Garcia. So this first slide is really mine, and then I'm going to back off and let it be the Raul Garcia show after that. I won't be far, I assure you, with this conversation. This first slide really demonstrates the foundational, I call them underpinnings of our budget. They're not very different than previous budgets in previous years, but they're very straightforward. They're very indicative of our values, of our collective thoughts, and really it's an articulation of this board's vision for the college, especially for this next year. First and foremost, as you see, Del Mar College employees, all facets of employees here at this college, we know that by taking care of our employees, that our students are then taken care of. There's no particular order here. I just happen to have that first, because when it comes to the budget, any budget that is an educational budget has a preponderance of its operational costs around employees. Ours is no different, and we put this at the top of the list to emphasize and focus on taking care of our most valuable assets as our people. It's people. We are a people-driven process, and we continue to put them forth as a high priority, so that this college continues to operate in the stellar way that it has done for over 80 years. The second bullet here, an underpinning of our conversation for today, is about student outcomes and student initiatives. Now, this board has undergone a robust strategic planning process over the past year, and for the first time, I think you've heard me say this, for the first time since I've been here, this has been, I should say, to the student outcomes have been the focus of our strategic planning efforts and initiatives and ideas. And I think it has the strongest sense of that. It has the most focused attempt at that I've seen since I've been here. And that is an amazing thing. That is an important thing. And I am just so proud that this budget will be built and tied to this strategic plan that will be launched this fall. Thirdly on here, the third bullet is the Southside campus. It's time to address and to on-ramp and to begin building the fundamental pieces of the Southside budget because that will be here before we know it. And the budget needs to begin reflecting that, and the investment that has been made by the community needs to be coincided with some operational dollars, and we're going to talk to you about how that's going to develop over the next couple to 3 years in a phased process. And then finally, technology. I put technology in here because it is a ubiquitous part of our operation. It is I call it the technological ecosystem that we have that is so delicately balanced. Mr. Alfonso was not able to be here with us today, but he'll be here at the following meeting, we believe, and we'll have him to talk more about that. I'm going to do the best I can to talk about the investment, the level of investment, and the importance of technology in improving our processes so that all employees and students and anyone who walks on, and Regents and everybody who walks upon, steps foot on this campus, it would be impacted by some sort of technological enhancement here at the college. We've learned that it improves efficiencies, it minimizes human error to the degree that we can apply it, the best degree that we can apply it, and it's an important part of our operations. We must stay ahead of the technological curve. And so with that said, technology comes in fourth place on the top 4 list for our 2020 operating budget conversation. Again, there's much more beyond this, but when Mr. Garcia and I sat down and talked about, what are the underpinnings, what are the primary pieces of this big puzzle that's reflected here on this slide, it's these 4. It's these 4 as we move ahead. Again, to the staff, so many areas of the operation, so many people have come together to put together thoughts and ideas and requests and so forth that relate to the budget. I want to thank them for all their efforts all the time and energy that they've put in. And Dr. Wilson, I know you just walked in. We were talking about the student outcomes aspect of the strategic plan. It's a lot of work's come to this, brought us to this point, and I look forward to Mr. Garcia's conversation and joining in along the way.
Dr. Escamilla, thank you for that introduction. Madam Scott, Mr. President, and members of the board, good morning. I have for you today the final stages of the budget plan. So let's begin with the strategic initiatives. All right. Please note that the college strategic vision for the next 5 years is now fully baked. Once the strategic plan is adopted, the college will transition into planning the operating activities and support for this vision. The upside is the college has already planned the following activities for fiscal year 2020. In the realm of student outcomes, the college will focus on student advising as part of the Quality Enhancement Program initiative for accreditation. The operating activities will help drive results for student degree and certificate completion, student persistence, student graduation rates, and student transfers. The 2020 budget includes a $1.3 million for this initiative. Next, the college will begin the implementation of campus management in fiscal year 2020 with a target for completion in fiscal year 2021. You will be happy to know that the final negotiated price is significantly below the planned budget. I'm estimating $1.9 million for phase 1 in the coming year of the software implementation funded with plant funds. The cost of phase one includes the cost of internal controls, consulting, and planning for the interface of campus management and other mission-critical software, such as Civitas, mobile application, and some other items. Next item. Current estimates suggest the incremental cost for operating the Southside campus for fall of 2022 will be $4 million. This includes $3.4 million in salaries for new positions. The remaining $600,000 will fund non-salary items, of which $430,000 is planned for utilities. As a side note, this $4 million South Campus capital outlay will have a rippling impact to the local economy, resulting in approximately $20 million infusion to the local economy. At some point in time, this $20 million infusion to the local economy will reach our students in the form of jobs. Next item. The college recognizes our employees are our most valuable resource. Accordingly, the budget includes employee raises and benefits for $1.7 million. I have a separate slide with a little bit more details on this employee raises. Next item. The planned budget for public safety total is $1.5 million, of which $500,000 will be used to onboard a police workforce, to purchase police vehicles, equipment, and upgrades to existing security cameras. So let's move on to funding sources.
Mr. Garcia, do you want questions as we go?
I'm open.
Now,
I'm very flexible.
Let's
Yes.
do questions on these strategic initiatives
Sure.
first, so that we can make sure we understand what we're looking at here.
And that being said, Regents, this is a critical conversation. We need lots of feedback. Again, these are the basic pieces, components. We still have to the end of the month of August, September 1st, to go through all the required meetings and so forth to approve the budget. There's still wiggle room. There's still time in front of us. But what we're going to be doing this year is taking the step and having conversations and taking the feedback that you can as early as possible to mold from your vision to mold the budget for the future for this coming year. Just FYI, Mr. Garcia and I were talking last night, and it is our hope that next year, this time, that we'll be even maybe if we're not lucky, if we're lucky and good, hopefully more. Both.
More good than lucky.
But yes, good, more than lucky. We will have this conversation up to a month earlier so that we can have the summer to focus on fine-tuning a budget as opposed to continually building. So just FYI there, but again, we need any and all feedback today, please.
So from an orientation standpoint, these two slides, the numbers that you have in the blue boxes, is that an incremental cost to our existing budget? Is that, I'm trying to understand what we're looking at here and the total at the bottom, and then I have a follow-up question regarding what your narrative was related to these numbers.
Yeah, so it's a combination of the two. I don't have the breakdown in front of me, but some of it is incremental cost, and some of it is just realigning our initiatives. So say, for example, advisory, yes, we do have in mind a couple positions, but at the end of the day, the goal of that unit or area is going to be very focused on advising. So what ends up happening is we start to transition a little bit more into say, let's focus, what are those strategic initiatives, let's institute those so that there's a target goal in mind at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And I think that target in mind would be more transparent in the next biennial funding in our state funding. We're hoping to see increments of performance in our performance funding stream of the state funding. Mm-hmm. I think that would be a little bit more transparent. More so with potential growth in the next 5 years. Hopefully something in the next 2 years, but definitely by year 5.
Well, if we can just, because I'm simple, so just help me focus on this year's budget.
Yes,
and I know you've got some slides later on that look at the long-term funding pieces. So as a matter then of understanding what's in front of us in these couple of slides, for example, goal number 4, learning environments, you talk about Southside Campus employee compensation and the police department.
Yes.
And the 4.154 number that's there does not equal what you just told us in your narrative, which was 4 million for the South Campus, $1.7 million in salaries, and $1.5 million for fully implementing the police department. So that's why I'm trying to understand what you're showing us here in
Yes.
versus the narrative.
So let's touch on the 4.1 million. We know that the incremental cost of the South Campus is going to be 4 million. So you're now left with 154,000. 154,000 really represents the incremental cost for the other two items, for the police department and the so I see that the 1.7 in employee compensation is not built into that number, so I do apologize for that. Yes.
Okay, so.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that we understand then, as we're going forward, again, were we looking at incremental cost versus last year? And so if that's not built in, then we've got your total down at the bottom is wrong as well.
Yeah, sure, that's about another 1.7 million, definitely on the incremental funding for the employee raises. The good news is I do have another presentation at the end of this month to fine tune the tax revenue dollars. I would definitely reflect those changes in that presentation.
Because I realize when we're talking about these strategic initiatives, for example, more advising and the tools and the resources you need for the QEP back in Goal 1,
yes,
that gets embedded in salaries. And so for us to understand the changes in that line item, the incremental changes from one budget to a next are related to these 2 or 3 different strategic initiatives.
yes.
One of which is pay raise, one of which is potentially new hires, which is staffing the Southside Campus. And this is how that number, that incremental number, changes our salary line.
Okay.
So that's also what we're looking for in terms of a level of detail. This is good discussion.
Yes.
But when we get to really understanding last year's budget versus the one that we're getting ready to approve, we'd like to see that level of understanding to make sure that we're all on the same page here.
So point well taken. If I frame this a little bit different, if I may, the $5.2 million increment in funding, you want to delineate a little bit further on these strategic initiatives to say this is what this increment dollars are being used for strategically, and then what is the transition of strategic initiatives, and what is the cost of that value in itself? Okay.
And transitioning this narrative into the budget document.
Yes.
Help us connect the dots between the narrative here and the final budget that we're going to be adopting.
Yes, point well taken.
Okay.
Okay.
Because this is a combination of salaries and other costs.
Other costs, yes, ma'am.
It's going to get embedded in. Yes, Dr.
And
Shirley.
it's, wasn't clear to me with the $4 million for the Southside Campus operation funding in our coming year's budget. What is $4 million for when we don't have the campus yet? I'm confused about that.
I'm sorry, what was that again?
You said about $4 million of that is for the Southside Campus operation funding, and if we're looking at the budget for the next fiscal year, what is that for in the next fiscal year when we don't have the campus yet?
Operational.
Yeah, it won't all come at once. It's an incremental, it's a multi-year phase in, and I think the rest of the presentation will reflect that. But it's,
Okay.
we're
So
not
this is
asking,
not-
we're not asking, no, these are big picture, big items, big buckets, and we're gonna show the time that it's gonna take to ramp up towards that and to build that budget. But no, by no means are we asking be looking for $4 million augmented just for the South Campus for this year. I know that's what it's
I thought we
intended.
were looking at numbers for the next fiscal year's budget, so that's why I was a little confused.
It's a big bucket approach right now that's gonna be looking at phasing, and he's gonna break it down by time for next year's budget.
Mr. Garcia.
My confusion, that 4.1 million, is a combination of several things. I'm going to, Jackie, do you have the breakdown of those values? Let me bring Jackie over with a little bit more details. I think what that number is really made up is the 1 million incremental cost for the Southside Campus, the 1.7 million in salaries, and then the rest has to be the DMC Police Department.
It was 1.5.
So 1.5, 1.7, that's about 3.2, 4.2. There it is, 4.5. I do apologize for that
Yeah,
confusion.
because
So-
This
so
is
clar-
the incremental cost, the 4.1, 1 million. And Mr. Bennett, you have a calculator, right? I'm gonna ask you to help me out here. 1 million for that.
He is a calculator.
1.7 for the salary increase, and then the 1.5 for the police department. I do apologize for that
Okay.
confusion.
So that
Yep.
makes the 8 million total closer to right.
The 8 million is all those different components, all incremental cost. I'm really sorry about that confusion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 4 million is the long-term annual cost, but
Yes.
we're not there yet.
Correct.
You think in fiscal year 20, we're going to have a $1 million incremental cost to start gearing up for and preparing for.
Yes, so let's talk about the $1 million. So, yes, it's the
Thank you.
startup cost to get us to that 4 million
Okay.
in year 3 or 4 of this budget plan.
Okay.
Mr. Garcia, I have a question.
Yes,
How much money are you going to be needing to implement Goal 6, which is, again, finances, and I don't see it included in the strategic plan there?
goal 6, goal 6 being the finance side of it. So essentially, what I envision for the finance is really an investment in new EFTs, one for the grant area and one for the accounting. That's your initial investment, is just new FTEs. In terms of financial outcomes, I think with the increase in staffing, it's going to allow us to be a little bit more focused on grants, potentially pursue some grant funding to add a little bit more robust to our program initiatives. So that's what I have in mind. And again, I think Mr. Bennett had brought up a couple of months ago about the need of increasing the staffing in the accounting office. So that's part of the drive for those changes.
What about upgrades to your offices?
In terms of upgrades, I think with the whole new construction and development, if we're looking about areas to operate, I think we're okay for now. I think we need to get past this major construction and renovation that's happening today with the campus that's happening right outside this building here. And then once that's completed, phase in the transition of my office to other areas from a capital perspective. Is that what you had in mind?
Sort of, but not really. You know,
Okay.
you've included the 5 goals there, and we have 6 goals, but I've noticed that you haven't included anything for Goal 6.
Yeah.
Do you need any money for Goal 6?
Well, I do, but I want to talk about the bigger dollars, you know? I mean, the 2 FTEs, that's about, I don't know, roughly, I'm guessing under 100,000. It's not of a major investment. I think that goal in itself is really to focus on the overall organization and its financial performance. As an indicator in terms of financial performance, is really looking at the CB's rating of our institution in terms of our financial condition relative to the other institutions, which, by the way, has been very strong. And so essentially when Goal 6 is not really necessarily my area, but it's really the campus-wide financial condition. That's really what it boils down to.
Thank you.
Does that help? Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions on these first 2 slides?
Okay. Oh,
Okay.
sorry about that confusion.
I confuse easily, so it's not on your
No,
fault.
that was me. That was me. Okay, moving on. All right. The following are the budget assumptions for our 3 major sources of funding. Let's start with property taxes. The college will finalize the property tax revenue around the 25th of this month when the college receives the certified appraisal report from the Nueces County Appraisal District. However, our estimated planned revenue will result in a $3.2 million change based on a 3% increase in property values and a rate change above the effective rate of 4.7%. The 4.7% rate change is consistent with prior fiscal year's rate of about 5%. Next is tuition. The planned revenue resulting in a 1.1 million change is based on a flat credit hour production and an increase in our corporate services enrollment and a $3 change to the semester hour tuition rates. Moving on to base state appropriations, the governor has recently approved the funding for community colleges. This will result in a $612,000 change in revenues. The total planned revenue change is $5.1 million.
So questions about this, Regents. These are the three pillars of our budget, of any community college budget right here that's represented. And these are the net changes that we're looking at going into building this year's budget. There's lots of bullets here. There's lots of conversation potentially. The one I'd like to really jump in on is down there with base state appropriations. That second bullet in that first column, first one to the left, is the 3-year weighted average of student success points. This is a piece that for the first time really came into play for this year's state appropriations. And that happens as a result of more students completing, more students being successful than ever before. We came through, I think it was a 22% increase from the last time that number was calculated. And that really ties, to me, this is one that I watch very carefully because that particular bullet right there ties to all of our operations and all of our student outcomes, and it goes right back to that strategic plan that we're putting together that is focused on student outcomes. So a lot of little intricacies in there. Property taxes, when we're talking to the appraisal district and working very closely with them. Mr. Garcia is getting to know them, they're getting to know him. They're getting along famously, I hear. So we've had a solid year. Our tax base has enjoyed a solid year of steady growth. I wouldn't call it exponential growth, but solid, steady growth. Tuition and fees, the board, those are important conversations, so we're going to have to go back and review. And probably late this fall, we'll do what we did last fall and talk about our philosophical approach and have conversations prior to adjusting any tuition. That was something that happened last year. We sat down, we talked about it early. We talked about, what is our philosophy? Is it hold and then turn off the spigot, turn on the spigot, or just let it run slowly and spread it out across the cohorts of students that come in from year to year? This is a result of that discussion, and we'll be going back to it. And again, base state appropriations, this will hold steady for 2 years. We have that $611,000 this year and next year. That came with a lot of hard work in Austin. Your presence there made a big difference. I hope that we continue to do those sorts of things at the state level and positively affect those base state appropriations. And then there are other things that we're going to be doing, be looking at. We're looking at schedules. We're looking at 8 weeks versus 16 weeks, or 8 weeks and 16-week schedules, and all these other sorts of things to move our student data, to move our students more quickly through the pipeline, and the like, because all those things are going to affect our appropriations, where we stand and how many students we complete. I'm going to stop here, but I will say the legislature has never been, in my 6 legislative sessions, this has been the most supportive it's been. At the same time, they are our legislators, and they are the legislature, and they are seeking state efficiencies. They're seeking to eliminate inefficiencies from any agency that they help fund. Okay, and that's a hard thing for someone in education that's a hard pill to swallow, but that's the reality, and that's what we're getting ready for from that perspective. So those are my comments.
On this slide, my concern is the flat level credit hour production. That means no increase in credit hours for this year?
The planned budget for fiscal year 2020 is a flat 0 increase in credit hour production. It is a conservative approach. For me to say we're going to up 10% and we fall short, that means budget cuts. And you don't want to do that in the middle of a
Yeah.
fiscal year.
So two things on that one, Mr. Bennett. We're an off funding cycle, first of all. And we're looking at we're in July. These are just preliminary conversations. So so looking at, we always, at this point, we always work off of a flat, just the same number from year to year at this point. Now, the final adjustment for enrollment after summer is completed and after we begin to see what fall enrollment is looking like on the preliminary stages is when we dial in and set a number according to a predictive number for fall tuition. So that's going to come later on this summer.
Okay, and I see on the 5-year plan, it's the same, no increase in the 5-year plan.
Yes.
Which, by the way, I have agreed with for years. So we're on the same page on that one. Now, my concern is, what is our percentage of dual credit students? Because they're paying at a third the price.
Yes.
And they're not paying the fees.
Yes.
So that's one concern. And another concern is we're looking at getting these students through more efficiently and reducing that 93 credit hours to graduation.
Yes.
Down towards the more towards the 60 hours. And a realistic concern is it may be flat. It's been flat for years. We've got that in the documentation here. And I projected flat for years, and that's what it's been. But with this initiative, could it be that we'll lose credit hours to the benefit of the students?
What particular initiative?
When we're reducing from 93 credit hours down towards the 60. Unless we're expanding student population at the same time, we may well lose hours.
So that was the importance and the emphasis on the success points. So it's all about inputs and outputs, and I know we're talking about human lives, so please don't, anyone out there watching this, please don't confuse my numbers speak for the lack of compassion for our students. We know that there are lives every day depending on what we do here, first and foremost. That being said, the state is starting to push to start to balance more on outputs as with the inputs. And because of that, that is where we've been making up for that front-end contact hour production. So with the student success points, we think that that particular category of funding will probably grow in coming years. We'll see how that works out. There was a big appetite for that at this last legislative session. We think that that'll balance out too. Your point being taken, we've been holding off. I asked this board 2 years ago, and this group of community leaders to stand down on the dual credit discussion. What are we going to do with that? We're at 1/3 the cost. Well, what we know is our competitors are out there doing it for no cost to the student. So quickly, what we happen to know from the school districts is that they're going to go with they're going to follow the path of least financial resistance to serve their students. So it's a delicate balance, and $100 is something that we probably the board could review at any given time for that particular aspect to offset some more of those costs. But then we have to look at statewide. We have to come back to the table, see what everybody's offering, see what our competitors are offering, and see how we balance that, because you lose that foothold with those students, and then there's a whole other conversation to be had when we lose them.
Yeah. So, Mr. Bennett, there's this concept called in private called loss leaders, right? Where you say, I'm going to bundle a package of products, right? But I know this one product is going to lose money, but at the end of the day, I'm selling the package because the volume is going to go up a little bit more as opposed to buy a single item. So that's one way of thinking the dual credit. It's part of one of those loss leaders that we have, but at the end of the day, it's filling in seats. Number two, it's going to help with our appropriation funding. Number three, I would say, let's take a look at what the future economic outlook is for this local economy. $50 billion pumped into this economy is building jobs, it's creating jobs. So yes, our initiatives to improve graduation rates and certificates, yes, that's part of the formula, but the other side of the formula is we need to also see what's going to happen in the next 5 years as that $50 billion continues to be pumped into this economy. More jobs, more families, and if we continue to build a strong, even a stronger reputation of what Del Mar has already today, it's just going to encourage students to continue to see Del Mar as another educational option, before they even look at any new competitors entering this growing market.
Can I unpack the dual credit just a little bit more? It's $99 for a class, for a 3-hour class.
3-hour class. Yes,
So
ma'am.
basically, the incremental cost is $210 for if somebody was paying full tuition versus $99. Now, there's fees on top of that,
Yes.
but just the straight tuition cost. We don't deliver all of those courses on campus. Some of those are delivered by the high school teacher who we credential. And so we don't carry all of those salary costs.
Correct.
I don't know exactly what that ratio is, but I know that there's multiple delivery methods for dual credit, one of which is at the high school, and we credential that teacher as professor for us. And then the other piece is, do we get state contact hours for those? So
Absolutely.
we get some reimbursement for that student. So,
Yes.
again, we've had this discussion before, and we probably need to have the dual credit analysis again to bring up the pros and the cons, as well as the philosophical loss leader kinds of conversations that you just had, to really understand the financial implications as well as the benefit, and how many of those students transfer then, have started dual credit in high school, and actually then come here to finish their degree program, all of those kinds of things. So I think there's a lot in these assumptions, and I'm glad we're unpacking them, because I think it's, you know what you mean by these assumptions in shorthand, but I think it's important that we all know what these assumptions mean as well.
Yes, ma'am.
The flat credit production, again, you're looking at a net number. So yes, we're going to try to tighten up the time to degree and some of those kinds of things. What are we doing, and where are the initiatives on increasing enrollment and preparing for increased enrollment? Again, not in this fiscal year, but in the next fiscal year. So is there a place in there where we're talking about recruitment, and are we going to do anything different in recruitment for the next fiscal year?
So with Dr. Silva not here, I'm going to jump in and update you on our latest conversations. In fact, we have a strategic enrollment management meeting being planned for the later part of this month to talk about that very thing. We're waiting for vacation schedules and all these other things to reconcile that particular meeting. There's been a tremendous effort with the Southside campus coming on board and focusing on our efforts there. And we knew that several years ago that those future students were this tall back then, and now they're this tall. And we've had multiple layers of recruitment that we've been implementing. We've been using traditional methods heretofore to reach out, but between recruitment, outreach, which are two different things, and marketing, those are going to be the three prongs that we'll put together for the recruitment aspects of the South Side specifically. Marketing has been what it's been. It's been a very strong marketing effort over the past several years. Ms. Jackson led that effort for a long time and paid off in a lot of ways with name recognition, branding, and all of those sorts of things, which is a big component to this. Our aspects our approach is going to be really paired out in these strategic enrollment management meetings that we have this summer. I'll bring those specifics back to you. I do know that it'll be looking at age groups, rooftops, demographics, all of these sorts of things. by particular area of the college district. Again, I won't ever look just at one particular campus. I'm going to be looking at 4.5 county service and even beyond, because there are some things that are happening both in district and out of district by way of our strong reputation that you cannot just, that is something that you have to feed. You don't get to just rely on. You have to continue to nurture that sort of thing. And so I think the short answer is, shorter answer is, besides our traditional approach of working with the high schools, working with financial, through financial aid and recruitment and those sorts of things, working with drilling down deeper into the younger and younger ages. That's what Valdar was all about. As well as bringing back students who have left some time ago without completing, as well as reaching out to the older retiring population that we've talked about. All of those components are going to be put together in a strategic enrollment management discussion this summer, and we'll bring those back to you. That's going to be my best discussion. That's my best response here without Dr. Silva.
Well, what I noticed on the goal 2, you had $1.25 or $1.26 million incremental cost to develop and implement the strategic communications plan. This says to promote services available to students. Is it just to promote services, or is it under goal number 2, or does that include additional marketing as well? That's why I was asking the resource question. Are there resources in here, or do we need resources around outreach and recruitment?
Okay, I see what you're saying there. So, recruitment.
Or is promote marketing?
This one is written as, yeah, on goal 2, is that impacting the strategic plan with our advising initiatives and so forth? This is more focused on the retention. I don't want to answer that one.
Okay, well, come back to us with that answer.
Yeah.
It's a resource question. Do we,
Yes.
to get flat, and I realize flat is a conservative budget number.
Yes.
But maybe your internal management goals and others are going to be, I think, more aggressive than that. But it's a resource question. Do we need resources for
Oh, absolutely.
outreach and recruitment over and above what we have traditionally done? So,
Duly noted.
okay.
Dr. Escamilla,
Yes.
Ms. Scott just mentioned the dual credit students, and it's my understanding that once a dual credit student completes 15 hours of college credit, that they will be required to have an advisor. Who pays for the advisors, the school districts, or do we pay for the advisor for the students?
So they're being asked to meet with an advisor of the college. And so it is a requirement between, what happens is all those things are coordinated between their high school counselors and our staff. And so those things are all set up. Once they start hitting those benchmarks, those meetings will be set up through the high school. And we're already working with them. Our teams are already setting up all of their classes and support services, and so at that point, they will be reaching out and working with our counselors. That's what the law is stating.
Okay, but we're not being,
With our counselors, yes.
but we're not being compensated for sending the counselors out there or having the students come out here?
On a fee basis or anything else, no. That's just part of the process that we provide for them. You know, the whole dual credit system or program that we have is all encompassing of support services and so forth. It is an onerous, it is a large operation that it has no particular recipe, but those students do receive full access to the campus. While they're on campus, there's many students who are on campus that access our offices and so forth as students, and then there are times where we have to reach out to them and do this on-site at their particular location.
And
We
I
have
really
both.
feel that this program is going to keep growing, because once more parents find out about dual credit, I think they want their kids involved.
Yes,
But anyway.
when the college 10 years ago was enrolling about 1,200 students, now we have 2,800 students, and that's on an annual basis. And so, yes, it's probably more popular than ever. I think what we received at this last legislative session was the biggest green light of support for dual credit, which means it's going to feed that system. And hopefully the legislature will review it at some point in the future, because at some point, there, I recognize, we have all recognized that there's a fiscal model that cannot be sustained for very much longer in the manner that we are providing it. So it is going to have to evolve. It is going to have to change, and we're going to have to work that through. But we have to be careful with what the state puts forth and how we affect their decisions governing that particular program here at the college.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have one more question related to the budget assumptions, and that's on the property tax piece. You have an increase in property values of 3%, and then plus new construction of $300 million that is taxable. So the $300 million is not included in the 3% increase in property values?
John, can you touch on that, please? How the 300 million factors into the tax modeling?
The
That the
3%.
that the state.
328,000, or 328 million is included in that percentage increase.
Do that. Get your microphone, please.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. The $328 million increase.
It's off.
Is included in that total percentage increase.
Okay, okay. I wanted to understand that. Very good. That was all of my questions on the income assumptions. Others have questions?
Just to clarify, the dual credit percentage for this year and the next 5 years on your assumptions, is it gonna remain the same, the percentage of dual credit students?
Those credit hours are built into the credit modeling, so yes, flat level
So it's
credit.
the same percentage?
Yeah, because the value of that credit is $100. You know, it's the.
What I'm looking at is if that goes up to 30% from the 20%, then we've got a decrease in the revenue.
Yeah. So based on the model, as we grow and that percentage does not, that increment does not change, there could be on that. So we'll take that note on incremental growth. Again, dual credit has to be reviewed for the sustainability. It works on it's working on a basis of a cost, a financial inefficiency for sure.
I think it's your loss leader.
And it's the loss lead.
Yes, but I will also say that the state appropriation funding does not factor that in either.
It helps.
Sure, it helps. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. We're good? Boy, that was a hot topic right there. That's a good slide, I can tell. Very nice. Moving right along. Let's go on to the total annual operating revenues. All right. Yeah, so, okay. The planned revenues for fiscal year 2020 is $107.6 million for a change of $5.2 million for fiscal year over from fiscal year 2019, which was $102.4 million. The rate of funding as a percentage of this total revenue, 107, as you can see here, 54% is coming from property taxes. Tuition and fees is 24%. I see it somewhere in here. And then the appropriations is 15%. So no surprises there. Those are our three major funding streams. We know that property tax is probably the most important one of all three, or has the highest funding level for our institution. Okay. All right, moving on right along. Let's talk about the MNO tax rates. The proposed MNO tax rate will result in $57.9 million in revenue, which is a change of 3.2 from fiscal year 2019 of $54.7 million. This is based on a tax rate of 21 cents, and it is relatively consistent if you look at the last 5 years, 21, 20, 20, 19. Not a big change there. I also want to point out that the proposed tax rate change, that is this value relative to this value, is 4.7, which is also consistent with prior year's 5%. Not a lot of big changes going on. All right. From the homeowner's perspective, with an assessed property value of $150,000, the 2020 MNO rate will change their tax bill by $4. That is the difference of these two values right here. Any questions?
I understand this is the M&O budget, but we also have another component to the tax rate, and the normal homeowner doesn't know there's two different components, and he really doesn't care because he's cutting one check.
Yes.
And based on my own analysis, I see the debt service tax is going up quite a bit because we're issuing a lot more bonds.
Yeah, I mean, I think there should be no surprise there, given that, you know, there was a discussion of how to fund the Southside campus years back. But you're also right. This presentation has been mainly focused on our operating budget. In the coming months, next month, we'll be taking a deeper dive on the debt service tax, which is the second component of the tax levy, and that is specifically focused on the general obligation bonds that specifically includes funding for the South Campus, which is my understanding was approved by the taxpayers
In 2016.
in 2016. Yes, sir.
And when we look at the debt service tax budget, will we look at that for the next 5 years as well?
Yes, I could definitely include a presentation
Okay,
on what
that'd be-
that looks
that'd
like
be
in 5
wonderful.
years. And you'll be happy to know that there are 3 bond obligations that will be maturing in the near future. More to come on that in one of my slides down as we move forward. So be patient, please.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, maintenance and operating revenues. Staying on topic with property taxes, property tax revenues, once again, this is just another presentation, what the 5-year looks like, a historical 5-year looks like. 46.7 million back in 2016, now it's 57.9 through 2020. Once again, the tax rate has been steady at around 20 cents. Any questions? All right, let's talk about Bay State appropriations. A little bit different. We have recently learned that the governor has approved the funding bill for institutions of higher learning. The college is scheduled to receive $33 million over a 2-year period. This is a $1.2 million increase from the prior funding period, mainly in the form of funding for student success. The funding rate for contact hours is $5.44, a change from prior year's rate of $5.40. The success point rate is $202.53, a change from the prior period rate of $171.56. And the state elected to keep the same rate for core operating funding, for the core operating funding rate. Any questions? Okay. All right. Let's talk about expenses. The planned fiscal year 2020 operating expense is $107.6 million. The allocation of financial resources remains relatively the same as in fiscal year 2019, with 73 cents of every dollar going towards salary and benefits, 8 cents going towards service and other operating costs, 3 cents for utilities, and 2 cents for revenue bond debt service. Now, the bond debt service here, Mr. Bennett, is specifically for the revenue bonds. For fiscal year 2020, the payment is $2 million. I also want to point out that the revenue bond will mature in fiscal year 2028. So we are on a path of maturing long-term obligations, so that's positive. Now, as I mentioned before, today's topic has been primarily on the operating budget. Scheduled for next month is a discussion for service tax assessment related to, and related general obligation bonds. I would like to point out and share some good news that there are 3 obligation bonds that will be maturing in fiscal year 2023 and 2025. The debt service payment for those 3 bonds in fiscal year 2020 is $11.6 million. Great news. More to come on this next month as we take a deeper dive on the debt service tax levy. So let's go back on the operating budget. All right. Next is a comparison of fiscal year 2020 and 2019 budget by major categories. The key takeaway from this is the slide is a 5.2 million change in expenses. This includes 4.2 million in salary and benefits and 1 million for the South Campus. That would be here, 1 million, and then the net for salary and benefits, all these activities right here. Okay? Okay.
Can we have a little bit of discussion
Yeah.
around what that $1 million represents, since there was some confusion earlier? Can you give us a
Yes.
sense of what that $1 million is about?
You want me to jump in, or you want to jump in?
No, please.
So I'll speak generally. This would be the incremental first investment for the employee aspect of the personnel that it's going to require to staff the Southside campus. Now, what we know, there's multiple groups, and we're going to have that broken out for us as we move ahead to describe the various staffing levels at the Southside campus. There's two basic groups. There are those programs and those current employees who will be relocated over there. Those primarily under the areas of the signature programs that we've been using the term to describe those unique programs that would be located out there that have been programming for the development of the campus, such as architecture, culinary arts, to biotech, to be some of the ones that come to mind right now. and so there are those existing staff. But what we know is we need to begin onboarding personnel for next year's, for the development of this campus. We need people to begin being selected. We'll need time for faculty to begin recruiting and doing those sorts of things. There's faculty and staff who will be operating this facility. And so for the timing of it, budgeting on an annual basis, on a year-to-year basis is tough, but we're trying to take it at an incremental approach. Not obviously, but as we've presented, it's a little over $4 million a year to operate that campus ultimately, and we'll be working our way incrementally. We want to be careful not to take too big of a bite of the apple at this juncture, because we want to be sure that we are able to expend those funds and be sensitive to not keeping those dollars unallocated. So we have an incremental approach. The $1 million is a round number that we've discussed that would be sufficient to bring on board again, faculty and staff. When you're talking about staff for these particular locations, we're going to be looking for someone who, a campus type of director, if you will. That's a generic term. That's not the title. I think we're fine-tuning that title. But we're going to be looking to really onboard that person who is going to be, I call it the keeper of the shop, who will be there every day, who will be there representing and living at that particular location. And so that person it's going to be important to really to reach out and bring that person on board so that they can see the development of this campus, be involved in the construction, be involved in the development from here on out, because we don't want that person to arrive the day we cut the ribbon or turn the key on that particular operation. We want that person to come in earlier, and not too early, but earlier to begin owning that operation. Again, there's a breakdown of other staff, support staff, and so those critical positions that would be necessary in the development are built into that number there, along with, again, recruiting particular faculty for the selected areas outside of the signature programs, in the core areas, and the various programs from arts and sciences to the other areas of the campus to support. That's really what that's about.
So we've got a 3% raise overall. Is that correct?
So we chose the middle of the road at this point. We have a 2, we have a 4, we have a 2, 3, and 4% scenario. At this point, we're what we have out there based on our assumptions right now. Again, still fairly early in the budget process. We have it set at a 3%.
So the increase of 11% in exempt employee salaries and 8% in non-exempt, that's 8% and 5% increase in personnel?
Mr. Bennett, I know you're a numbers guy, but I'm ready for you, sir. So, yeah, the difference represents is positions that have not been, that are still open positions. That's what it is.
So
And that's
so
the
they're
difference.
authorized, not yet filled?
Authorized but not filled.
That's
Yes.
what helps
Plus,
us.
keep in mind that this is, when we talk about salaries, and Tammy will present right now real quick, but we're talking about the three major categories, right? Faculty, exempt, non-exempt, but then there's overload. There's a different compensation component that is not factored in that 3%. It is a compounding effect to faculty overload, which is another form of compensation for our faculty. Plus, there's other costs associated that's built into this number, sir.
But the
Tammy,
overload,
do you want to touch on that?
the overload would be under faculty salaries, though, wouldn't it?
Right, and let me
Okay.
kind of take a step back, and I'll answer your question. You have to look on the exempt piece. You may think there's an 11% increase, but that doesn't, it includes the proposed 3% salary increase. But it also increases, like on the continuing education side, people that provide instruction on the CE side, they are exempt employees or they are non-exempt employees. We have quite a few part-time instructors on the continuing education and workforce side that are paid by the hour because they're not full-time employees. So any growth in those areas are built into these numbers. Also on the exempt salaries, we have a lot of exempt personnel that are truck driver instructors. They're exempt, they're not faculty status. We have a lot of instructors that are full-time, like on our CNA program. They are exempt personnel. We also have a lot of our corporate service contracts that we go out and we do training. They are paid out of the exempt and non-exempt salaries. They're not faculty status. So we do have a lot of positions that are built into the exempt and non-exempt that support those initiatives on the continuing education side and also on that workforce training and workforce development side that are part of these numbers.
Yes.
So you have to look at that's the big picture of, talk with my hands, that's the big picture of the exempt, non-exempt. It's not just, some people typically think, oh, it's administration. No, it supports a lot of instruction. It supports a lot of other services on the workforce development C side and these contracts we have, like, the contract we have with Gulf Coast. And, there's quite a few positions tied to that contract, which are reflected in this budget.
So I do have a separate slide that will touch on specifically on what the raises are for the different categories. That makes up the 1.7 million overall for this bucket.
Dr. Escamilla, what would be a good way for you all to share with us that breakdown of again, the 3% raise, I see it in a slide coming, but what are unfilled positions or new positions and what are instructor positions, but you have to categorize them under exempt and non-exempt? Because I think what we struggle with is trying to understand our instructor and faculty salaries. We need to hire those people. That's what we do. That's what we do. We hire people to teach students who want to learn. But for us as policymakers to understand the administrative load, and again, we've got initiatives that we know are non-teaching positions that we want to add to in terms of advising and other kinds of things. Help us get a handle on what those numbers look like, so and figure out maybe the best way to present that to us.
Yes, I have that.
I don't doubt your narrative, but it would be nice to see the numbers.
It broken down because those numbers have changed over the past several years as we've invested in continuing education as an operation. That program has more than doubled over the past 7 years, I think, 6 years anyway. And as such, it has changed the shade of green, if you will, for the dollars in exempt and faculty salaries. And if you look at it from a traditional with a traditional lens, it says, well, why are you overloading this? Well, there's a lot of instruction in there. Lenora, you had some comments.
Thank you. I just want to say, for example, our CNA, Certified Nurse Instructor positions are all in the exempt or non-exempt classification. And just starting last fall, we added 17 school districts. And so that was 17 full-time positions that are classified as exempt or non-exempt. And then with every contract, we have these contracts and we roll those salaries in, and we also pass those dollars directly through for payment. So they're
Yeah, so,
They're in the expense side, but then we also have them in the revenue side.
On the revenue side, is that one of our assumptions then, under tuition and fees, that we have those contracts? Is that where it shows up on the revenue side?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe that would be one place that we could see it offset. What are our anticipated contract fees for those contract training services, so we can see what that offset number would be?
yeah, sure, let's go back to that presentation then, on the tuition change, right? Right here, yeah. So the tuition increase, the incremental increase for the $3, I believe, is 861,000, right?
Say it again, Ro.
861,000. So the difference between the 1.1 and the 800, that represents the corporate contract increase in revenue.
Right. But again, we don't see that as an assumption, so you didn't key us to think, oh,
Sure.
there's a revenue side to
the
those
cost side.
expenses. And
Good point.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Duly noted, and I have a note here for more analysis into the various aspects of the various positions, and then also analyzing revenues versus expenditures on those increases of the positions.
On a slightly different question on the raise issue, just wanted to clarify if that's a 3% pool, and then there is within the administration the ability to vary that based on merit, or is it just across the board 3%?
So Tammy's walking up. So Tammy, describe and answer that. I don't want to answer it twice.
No, when we,
Well, before we touch on that, I'm going to skip these next slides because it's a redundancy. I'm just going to go straight to the salary. It's a hot topic. So before you get started, Nora pointed out something very important, is that the exempt employee, we have faculty exempt employees. This is to Lenora's point. That is in this separate line item. But I intentionally put it under faculty because the reality is this group of employees really represent faculty. So I had to pull that out of the exempt employees. That was a huge undertaking to make it happen. But I wanted to demonstrate to Lenora Key's point is that exempt employee faculty is built into the exempt. Now, maybe as a thought process, maybe I can work with my team to say, let's reconfigure this a little bit differently, so that we can pull out the faculty piece and really do a better representation of the salary costs. But we built it into this report right here.
Yes.
what we do is we have policy driven. You're eligible for a salary increase if you meet a certain hire date or if you also have a satisfactory performance evaluation. We have historically, and this is what we do, and this is something that Dr. Escamilla believes, and I truly believe too, is we raise everyone's boats at the same time. So we don't have the merit base. It goes off of the eligibility of your annual evaluation. And so it's a 3% across the board for exempt, non-exempt. So anyone that's eligible, it would be a 3% across the board, and that's historically what we propose. We don't have the, I know some entities do, to where you get a certain amount of money, then you get to distribute the way you want to. If it's your budget dollars, we don't have that. It's across the board. It's more like a cost of living based increase.
Going into this slide right here on that first one with the faculty, this faculty increase here to 50,000 as a base. We've been working on that for, I don't know, 6 years, I think, or more, when we decided a long time ago that we would be working towards an across-the-board base pay salary to be competitive, to be more and more competitive from year to year. And what we're proposing today is getting from the $48,750 base pay for faculty to the 50,000 level, and that's taken a long time to get to, longer than I wish we could have, but would have. But we're here. It's being proposed as in the budget, and I think it's at least a benchmark, something that we should be very proud of. At the end of the day, I think that our state ranking reflects that from the Texas Community Colleges Teachers Association. We continue to stay in the top 5 for average pay for faculty. It's never an ending. It's not an end to a conversation. It's not, but this is an important benchmark that we cannot forget, because we worked a long time to get here. And incrementally, albeit, but we think we're finally here. We won't be here finally here until September 1 when this budget is approved. But that is a big step for us to take and a big investment. I just wanted to kick us off with this slide by talking about that.
Yeah. So I do have a little narrative. Hopefully it'll let, okay, go ahead.
Can I ask a quick question? I can't say I agree or disagree with the approach of no merit pay specifically or using a pool. And so if it is more of an across-the-board raise, are the supervisors trained very robustly, I guess, in how to do an effective performance evaluation that truly captures somebody's performance, since their raises are going to be dependent on that?
We do have annual training for our performance evaluations for supervisors every year. HR conducts that training every year. We also have a evaluation tool. So it's a form that is filled out. Employees also get the opportunity to do their own self-evaluation to turn in prior to receiving their evaluation from their supervisor. And then they also have a chance to have any type of input afterwards also if there's something that they may not agree with. So HR does conduct supervisor training based on how to complete effective and efficient evaluations and accurate.
Is the practice pretty much, though, the max raise anybody is ever going to get is 3% regardless of performance?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it depends on the budget year. Like last year, it was a 2%, so it depends on our dollars. So it's the practice of whatever amount
That the board adopts.
approves.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, and that could change from year to year. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
And evaluation for faculty are conducted every year, is that correct, or every other year?
That is a schedule, and it depends on if they're tenure track. If they're tenure track and they have not met tenure yet, then they get an evaluation annual. Once they reach tenure, then it's only every so many years, and then after that, it goes into like a pool. So there's a pretty significant policy on faculty evaluation. But when they're tenure track, that means basically they do get an evaluation every year until they reach tenure.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sure. I do have a little narrative I really want to spell out for you guys. Give me a second here. So in the coming year's planned budget includes an increase of $1.2 million to the common base salary from this year's $48.7 to $50,000. In addition, tenured and tenure track faculty will receive an additional $829 for years of experience. As a result of these two changes, the increase in the salary expense from $786,000 represents a year-over-year increase of 3.2%. In addition, faculty will receive $197,000 in benefits for a combined compensation package of $983,000. That's this value right here. If I can get my mouse working here. Oops. All right, exempt and non-exempt employees. The planned budget includes a 3% salary change with a value of $551,000. And in addition, they will receive $137,000 in benefits for a combined compensation package of $688,000. So I know we jumped a couple of schedules. I just want to show you there's not much of a change there. It's just representations of this high-level summary, just a little bit more in detail. Would you guys like for us to touch on some of these other items?
I have a quick question
Yeah.
on what you just talked about. Do you budget as if everybody is going to get the 3%, even though you don't know yet what their performance evaluations are going to be for the year?
That is definitely a conservative approach, right? You want to over budget on your expenses, and then based on the results, hopefully you're crossing your fingers and you have money in there to cover those costs.
Actually, we budget on the salary increase. These are actually people who are already eligible. Our evaluations are conducted earlier in the year.
Okay.
So they run from March 1st to the end of February. So evaluations are completed way before we even start the budget. So we know who's eligible for the raise. And then our cutoff for new hires is May 1st.
Okay.
So anyone hired after that date would not be eligible. So we already had those pieces earlier in the year, so that these are already known factors. So these are actually people, of course, it changes daily because of, there's turnover and there's people that are hired and people that leave, but this was a snapshot in time. So at that snapshot in time, we do this after May 1st, because then we have all the new hires captured and the evaluation process is complete. So this was a real live analysis of who would be getting the raise and how much it would be for exempt, non-exempt, and faculty too. Okay.
Have we had any input from the faculty on the raise?
Yes. Yeah, so working with the faculty council officers is the primary messaging entity that I meet with on a regular basis. They've given an analysis, and this year I got a written analysis as to what their expectations were, and I was very appreciative of the faculty council's officers' efforts, and I'd like to explain that what they give is a full, I call it long-term analysis, long-term targeting of what they hope to get to. They always know that what they ask for on paper is a long-range target, to put it simply, and it can't always be attained in one fell swoop. So, but yes. And I was just going to say, and I'm working with the faculty council and the faculty in general to get that to fine-tune that particular request earlier in the spring semester. Typically, I get it around April or May. I'm gonna start asking to see if that analysis can't be given to us in the February-March timeframe for more consideration.
I have one detail question related the MNO budget detail. We have a security line item and a campus police line item, and so the difference between the two and the standing up of our campus police, you actually have, a little bit less. You've got a decrease in campus police. So my question is around the standing up of the campus, the long-term plan for campus police, and what the difference is between that and security.
Yes. So on the campus police, I think there's two components to our security operations. All right. One is and I believe it's considered an outsourced type of component, not too sure. And then that's the onboarding. And so the campus police, the $500,000 is the cost of onboarding that service into our institution. The decrease to $45,000 is that we budget for campus police over the last 2 years, and I'd have to revisit that, but my guess is that we may have already funded some of those costs, and so we are now looking at continue to fund some initial investment costs, not necessarily continued operation costs, but the initial investment to get that area up and running.
So the salaries are buried within the salary number up top, and this is hard costs?
So the outsourced piece is at the top number.
Right.
The piece that we're going to onboard is this campus police, which includes the salary piece, the vehicles, the equipment, the cameras, and what have you.
Okay.
Does that help? Yeah.
Okay.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
I mean, so far we've been talking about staff, employees. What I'd like to know is that where do the cafeteria people, where do they stand in all of this? They're contract people or what?
No, sir.
No, sir, they're not contracted. They're our employees. Tammy?
Okay, so if there are employees, like you say, it says employees and stuff, okay, so I want to know about
Sure.
what are their benefits, because that's something else that comes in here, so you can tell me a little bit about that.
All of our employees, for the food service, they are either like the manager's exempt, and then primarily the other employees are non-exempt. So any employee that is a benefit eligible employee, they're full-time or they work 30 hours or more, they're benefit eligible, they receive the same benefits as anyone else that's exempt or not exempt, or even faculty for that matter. So any employee that's benefit eligible, it's considered full-time or three-quarter time, we all have access to the same benefits.
So they do have 30 hours or more, or do we give them just?
And we
20?
do have part-time personnel. There are a few full-time in food service, but we do augment it with part-time personnel. And of course, we do have certain things like summer. We don't have as many because it's slower, and there is a certain time period that they do shut down altogether. But we do augment it with part-time personnel. They do on occasion, they might, if they are short or they don't have enough part-time, they may also augment it with possibly like a personal agency. A temp service may send some people in sometimes, or if they have a special event, they may actually get third-party personnel from a temp service, but primarily there are employees.
And let's just say, I'd like to know, as far as, how much do they get paid, the ones that are non-exempt or whatever, can you do that later, whatever? I just want to know, as far as like, do we go with whatever the state says right now, this is what they get, or what?
Well, we go by what we're asking for. We go by, all of our jobs have what we call a pay grade, so it depends on the skill set and the skill type and what we're asking for. And it has a dollar amount attached to it and a range. So it depends on what we're hiring for.
Right.
And, the pay schedules are published, but it just depends on what we're looking for. Is it a cook? Is it a cashier?
Mm-hmm.
So you look at those differences, and we have a pay schedule attached to it, and they come in within that pay schedule.
So, Mr. Salinas, a couple of things. So, I want to point back to this presentation. So, the full-time employees are in the exempt, non-exempt. What's not in this presentation is the part-time information that Tammy just referred. In terms of the compensation piece, it's a little bit more complicated because the cafeteria is operating as a self-supporting entity. And so part of the decision factor as to the compensation piece is how profitable is the cafeteria. That definitely plays into the level of compensation. Now, if we were a franchise, a McDonald's, a Big Mac, money is just flowing in. But the fact of the matter is our core mission is education. And so that's where the focus of our resources are. And yes, nutrition for our students is important, but it's a balancing act to make it profitable so that we can fund those particular salaries.
The other thing is, for example, like the people that have to make sure that everything is operating, okay? Let's say the custodians. I mean, where are they? Are they exempt, non-exempt, what?
Well, right now, our custodial service is outsourced. Oh, excuse me, sir, go ahead.
That's the one that is outsourced, Mr. Salinas.
I'm sorry, what?
Our custodial services are outsourced. Yes, we have a company that we contract with for custodial services.
Okay, so those people that we contract, you're saying, what, contract here in Corpus, or they're contracted someplace else, or what?
I'd have to revisit that,
the
contract agreement. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's a company that all the employees, while the employees are based out of here, primarily on the day-to-day are local folks. The company is out of San Antonio, if I'm not mistaken. It just got bought out not too long ago.
Yeah. But I would say all their employees are really local residents, who probably pay into our MNO tax rate anyway.
So we don't have a company, we gotta go to San Antonio, we don't have a company here in Corpus that can do that, I suspect, I guess.
Well, the company, I'm not too sure what vendors exist in our local area, but I can tell you the name may be in San Antonio, but their employees are really our residents that pay our MNO tax rate and our debt service tax.
So, and also so that is something that was visited about, I don't know, several years ago, when we went out to outsource and switch from in-house services. The particular company that won that contract and so forth, that established themselves here, were from a different town at the time, and then were subsequently bought out. Are there companies here in town that could be doing that sort of thing? To answer your question, if we go out for an RFP and that sort of thing, I think that's when you would determine that. But at the time that we went outsourced, it was determined that company brought us the best level of service for the price.
Well, one of the things, I guess, maybe in the future, whatever, maybe we can get it out and let's see some other people to come in and so they can bid or do whatever and see what happens. Maybe we might have something different here.
Agree.
Yeah, there's a review of the contracts, and those have annual, or excuse me, not annual, but they have certain timed reevaluations for those types of events, Mr. Salinas, and that I don't have the schedule with me.
I think the last time that one went out for RFP was 2016, 2017. So we're in a current year contract with them, and I'd have to go back. I can go back and look, because we had it at a board meeting a couple months ago as to how many more years we had left on that particular contract. But it did go out for bid as recent as 2016, 2017 is from.
Yes. So it's 11:54. I was excited on the 5-year forecast. My team really worked very hard. Where does the board want to go with this for the
Let's
next 6
keep on
minutes?
going for a little bit, and we can go into the lunch hour a little bit.
Okay.
Not
okay.
30 minutes into the lunch hour, but we can go a little bit into the lunch.
Perfect. So.
I realize it's our fault, because we're the ones asking the questions.
No, these are great questions. Thank you so much. So let's go on to the financial forecast then, if it's okay with everybody. Yeah. Okay.
As you do, Mr. Garcia, I'd just like to say that the financial forecast is something that's been long coming and so forth, and this is sooner than I expected the first iteration. This is the first iteration of a 5-year plan. We're going to be working on this intently. This is a leaping off point. This is not the ultimate version of this. I dare say it'll evolve year to year because that's what they do, but I want to thank Mr. Garcia for jumping out ahead of expectations and putting this first iteration together for us today.
Okay. Thank you. So after months of building a financial modeling, gathering and synthesizing quantities of data by my team, John Johnson, Dr. Kathy West, Jackie Landrum, and Christina Gonzalez, we have the college's first attempt at a 5-year financial forecast. The 5-year forecast is grounded on multiple variables that include current and future economic and local labor market conditions. The Corpus Christi Regional Economic Development Corporation reported a $50 billion capital infusion to the local economy. This capital infusion added 2,500 in new jobs, 155 million in related payroll to the local economy for the 3-year period ending 2018. Exciting news, exciting news. The 2018 annual report also suggests that a similar growth pattern is expected through 2020, adding 300 new jobs and $100 million of related payroll to the local economy. Once again, exciting news. The combined unemployment trend for San Patricio and Nueces County reported by the Workforce Solutions support this trend. The unemployment rate is at 3.6% or 3.6 as of April, down from 2019 down from August 2016, which was at a rate of 6.21. The expectation is that this unemployment rate will remain relatively flat with a potential change and uptick of 4.9 by fiscal year 2025. With that said, the local economic outlook for the next 5 years is positive. All right, so let's go over the forecast budget assumptions. The expected labor growth and unemployment rates will continue to drive housing demand, resulting in an increase in property values. The average historical growth in values from 2016 to 2018 is 5.6%. Accordingly, the college will use a conservative 3% increase in property values in the 5-year forecast. Moving on to tuition and fees, with the expectation that the unemployment rate will remain relatively flat, the forecast is built on the assumption that student enrollment will remain flat as well. In addition, the forecast includes a $3 tuition increase per year for the next 5 years. This will generate approximately $861,000 in annual revenue. This is consistent with the 2020 budget.
Let me stop right there. That's a very sensitive subject to everybody, and that is a placeholder. Okay, that is, nothing is carved in stone. That is with my initial comments about, we evolve, we will change year to year. We know we will adjust that. But again, for forecasting, we have to plug something in there. So I want anybody who's watching this to say, oh my gosh, it's going to be $3. Maybe not. Maybe $3.50, maybe $2. We don't know. So but it is a placeholder for forecasting.
As a comment, before the state deregulated tuition for publics, the step increase was $2 a year. So it's not an unreasonable amount.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I will piggyback off of that. For my public audience, please, it still needs to be vetted with the board. The board will have a decision in this in the coming months every year. So again, this is just a placeholder. So, all right. So let's move on to state appropriations. We have learned that performance is a key indicator of state new funding. It is likely that this trend will continue into the future. This makes forecast difficult because Del Mar's funding levels is contingent on the performance of the remaining 49 community colleges in the state relative to the state's funding capacity. So a lot of variables come into play. So this is very difficult to do. So the next best thing is to base the future funding on improved performance of our student advising that is part of the QEP initiative in the coming months. Accordingly, the planned forecast includes an annual increase that is similar to the current biennial funding of $600,000 per year. Moving on to expenses. Based on the 5-year labor and economic outlook, salary increases are planned to mirror fiscal year 20 and non-salary expenses at around 3%. Non-salary expenses are planned for 0 to 5% increase depending on the nature of the expense. For example, no increase to current funding levels for planned equipment, while utilities are expected to increase at 5.7% year over year. The expense rate structures were determined using a combination of the higher educational price index rates and the college historical burn rates. Lastly, the planned contingency expense is based on a 1.5% of the total expenditure budget in accordance with Board Policy B4.1.1. Okay. All right, so preliminary MNO tax rates for the next 5 years. This slide shows the planned forecast based on an MNO rate increase above the effective rate ranging from 1% to 5%. That would be this line right here. This will result in revenues of $57.9 million in fiscal year 2020 and $70.1 million in 2024. That'd be this line right here. From a homeowner's perspective, with a $150,000 assessed property value, the change in the tax bill will range from $4, as you can see here, $319 to $330, that's $4. And then it will decrease eventually by $4 going from 2023 to 2024. So what does this all mean? Well, here's what the 5-year forecast looks like. You have a balanced budget, as you can see here. There's not a lot of major fluctuations. It's pretty much steady. Your biggest jump is going to be right here in the Southside campus. $1 million in 2021, another $1 million in 2021, and then 2022, 2.5, $4 million, and then the 4.2. What this analysis does, and I'm going to go back to this presentation, this 5-year forecast has pretty much a smoothing factor so that we are not going significantly high in one particular year for our different property owners. So it's sort of trying the strategy to say, let's keep it even keel so that, to your point, Mark, I think you said take a little bite at the apple every year, and then eventually when you get to the 4 million, you don't see that big spike in the M&O rates.
I'd like to comment a little bit about the post-legislative perspective on that topic right there. You know, we were facing a tremendous threat, frankly, with the changing of the rollback rates and so forth, and for community colleges. The fact that we remained whole and kept that capacity enabled us to put together a multi-year approach versus having to go take 2 bites at the apple as a whole and do things in 2 short years. That's a big deal. That was a great vote of confidence from our legislature, and enabled us to look at a multi-year slower growth approach to staffing and funding our Southside operations.
This forecast doesn't include any future bond issues?
No, sir.
Any capital improvements?
No, sir.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit more. This will show our focus today is the operating budget. This 5 years focused on that. The added additional bond that you're referring to is really a general obligation, and that is a different conversation, a different set of dollars. Why? Because the funding stream is different. It's tax driven, and that's already been approved by the taxpayers. And we will definitely take a deeper dive next month as we talk about the change to the debt service tax rate.
Yes, sir. This is MNO maintenance and operations of the campus.
Yes, sir.
So again, this is new. The strategic plan is finishing baking and hasn't yet been formally adopted. I'm curious as to the next iteration of the next discussion, whether it's a year from now or a few months from now, to understand how assumptions and challenges that are being addressed in the strategic plan might impact this. Again, enrollment, for example. If we're seeing increases or decreases in contact hours based on more efficiency, then what are the plans to make sure that the net enrollment dollars, that the net tuition and fee dollars are the same? Again, that's that flat because of the impact of those things. So that's the conversation I think that will help us really understand all that's baked into these assumptions. And I realize you might not have all of those today, and we probably don't have time to really unpack it today, but I think that could really be beneficial for us to understand how the strategic plan and this document are going to live in the same world, and then what we as Regents need to know and help with in that discussion.
October will be a good opportunity to, as we talk about our enrollment in a non-base year report, to examine those sorts of things. The reason why I was looking over at Ms. Keys was because this will be a fantastic, for me, it's an interesting time, because here we have all-time low. The employment rates are at the lowest. The unemployment rates are, and so it's going to be curious to see how the continuing education. I'm getting Dean Corus back there nodding his head, because when the economy goes one way, the continuing education follows that trend. So that's why we put these two pieces together. So that correlation and or whatever, that those phenomena are going to be interesting to see. That's where your continuing education comes in and supports the budget. So October will be a good time to do that. It's not exactly apples and apples because of the quarters system that CE is based upon versus the semester system, but I think we can do a pretty strong analysis to kick us off towards that discussion. The other piece really quickly is that just sometime before the end of fall, to touch bases on preliminary discussions on tuition and everything else, gives us that segue to open up a broad budgetary discussion. Here's an update, here's where we are, here's what we have in hindsight. So between those two meetings, I think we can gain some of that analysis.
Yeah, if I may add, part of the answer to your question is developing a foundation of how to capture, summarize, and synthesize that data. And so my office is prepared to work with Dr. Christina Wilson's office to see how we can develop some overlay of those business practices so that we can do that and really make this a little bit more robust. But this is a good starting point.
We've definitely been talking about how to integrate as we shift from development to implementation. So we've mentioned before that we have annual plans. So we're looking at the 5 years and the annual plans and working to make those bridges more concise. So yes, it's in the works.
So more to come on that.
Other comments?
I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
Very pleased to see this. I've been greatly anticipating it. How long have you been here, sir?
11 months. 11
about
months.
11 months.
He doesn't know.
Yes.
Wonderful document. Thank you for bringing it to us so quickly. One request,
Yes, sir.
could we have balance sheets?
Balance sheets. Okay. Yes. I think I still have another 11 months. Is that right?
As quickly as possible, that's
Yes,
fine.
Thank you. Sure.
Good.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Okay. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for all the hard work and from your
Yeah.
team as well. I
Yeah.
know that this is a team effort, and we appreciate all the work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before we adjourn this portion of the workshop, we do have an opportunity for general public comment. Is there anyone to make public comment during our workshop? Thank you very much. Mr. Jack Gordy, please come forward.
Jack Gordon, I live at 4118 Bray Drive. I got one suggestion as far as public comment. Why is Delmar different than anybody else when it comes to public comment? Everybody else, the city, county, school district, everybody has public comment at the beginning of the meeting. That way people know when you're going to have public comment. Now the way it is, they have no idea when public comment is going to be because it's at the end of the meeting and they don't know when the end of the meeting is. They know when the meeting is going to begin. Common sense, and I'll say that, common sense would say have public comment at the beginning of the meeting, not at the end of the meeting. When you have it at the end of the meeting, it's an indication that you don't want to hear from the public. That's the indication that the people get. Okay, and the next thing I wanted to bring up is the lawsuit against the Attorney General. The Attorney General has said 4 times now, 4 times, release the public information. But Delmar won't listen to the Attorney General. They still got an appeal going. And it's costing money. In the month of May alone, just in May, Delmar paid out to outside attorneys $9,773.50 to outside attorneys. If we're paying that much to outside attorneys, why do we have a college attorney? We don't need one if we're going to pay that much out. It's something that, and this Board of Regents needs to find out why Delmar will not release the information after the Attorney General said 4 times release it. It don't make no sense. So this Board of Regents needs to get involved and do, I'll put it this way, do what you were elected to do. Represent the people.
Thank you, Mr. Gordy. We do not have closed session during the workshop, so we will reconvene for our regular board meeting at 1 p.m. today. This workshop is adjourned at 12:12 p.m.